After declaring victory on health care last week, this is likely the last thing President Donald Trump wanted to hear this week.
We felt like it was critical that we get this information to the White House. We believed that General Flynn was compromised with respect to the Russians.
Former Acting Attorney General Sally Yates testified at length before the Senate yesterday on concerns she shared with the White House about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. But it took the White House more than 2 weeks to fire Flynn, and only after the administration said he misled the vice president. Today, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer defended the move.
I think if you flip this scenario and say, what if we had just dismissed somebody because a political opponent of the president had made an utterance, you would argue that it was pretty irrational to act in that manner.
While the battle over Yates' story and Russian election interference rages on, it's now the Senate's turn to take up that other hot potato, which is health care reform. Joining me is a man who went down swinging on the bill in the House, Democratic Congressman Joe Kennedy. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, to go back to Sally Yates and the White House today saying that her testimony really doesn't matter, that she's merely a Clinton supporter at the end of the day. That's what we're seeing here. How do you respond to that?
Sally Yates is a dedicated public servant that's spent nearly 3 decades in the Justice Department. The fact that she resigned over a disagreement she had with the constitutionality of an executive order put forth by the president that has been struck down twice by the courts, and the fact that she was standing up for national security brought information that showed that the National Security Advisor, the designee, was compromised by Russians because of actions that he took. And then that the White House took over 18 days to actually relieve Mr. Flynn of his duties is astonishing.
Before we get to the present administration, what about the past administration? That he still had clearance under the Obama administration, which many are arguing paved the way for him to still be in this position that he is in today, today.
One, Obama fired him. 2, the security clearance that was given to Mr. Flynn was not actually given by the White House. It was given by an independent agency, the DIA. So saying that the Obama administration should have revoked it, I think, is a bit of a misnomer here. The moment that the compromising information came to light for DIA, it was, in fact, revoked. So I think this is, once again, an effort by this White House to throw up more smoke and mirrors, to somehow divert attention away from the fact that what you have in General Flynn's actions here is a genuine national security crisis that this administration took 18 days to rectify because the National Security Advisor designee lied to the Vice President of the United States and then got caught. That should never be allowed to happen.
What happens now? A lot of people talk about this, that these issues keep coming up, and then more issues come up, that there aren't investigations they want to see fulfilled. So where does this go from here?
Look, first obligation to this is squarely on the President of the United States. There is one person in the entire country that can answer some of these questions that are still outstanding, and that happens to be President Donald Trump. He should come forward to the American public, give a speech, and actually just lay out his past history with Russians, lay out his tax returns to alleviate questions that people have about whether he or his business interests might in fact be compromised, or the Russian government or Russian investors might have leverage over him, and just start to have a full and honest assessment with the American public so that we can have confidence in this administration, which is what, look, Democrat or Republican,
but knowing that's probably not going to happen, because it hasn't happened to this point. How do you move on with that?
But that is a decision that this president has made to not have a full accounting of his ties, alleged ties, to Russia. And why he won't answer those questions is going to lead the American public to continue to ask those questions, which just puts this entire administration under a cloud of questions of secrecy and of suspicion as to whether there are still members of this administration, senior members up to and including potentially the President of the United States himself, that is somehow compromised by Russia.
Do you believe they are?
I have no evidence to indicate that he is. I have no evidence to also, there's an awful lot of questions that I think need to be answered so that we can be certain that he isn't. Look, I'm a member of Congress. I take an oath to uphold the Constitution. I want to have confidence and faith in this administration, in our president, and in the personnel that he appoints and that he is surrounded with to make these decisions. They're critically important ones that are taking place today, including the announcement that we're going to arm Kurdish forces with a fight in Syria. This has dramatic implications for geopolitics and our relationship with Russia. I want to make sure that everybody out there can have confidence that this decision is coming from the right place. The president has an obligation to make certain that no one is asking additional questions of this administration.
But how do you do that, Congressman? Because as we know, there's a lot that's not forthcoming. And I just spoke with we spoke with one of your colleagues, Michael Capuano, on the radio recently. He talked about how the president and the administration aren't even disclosing troops, something that was normal protocol under the Obama administration, but they're not disclosing who's being sent, where in the world, how many troops are being sent there. I mean, the cloaks of security seem to be coming down. So how do you have any recourse? Do you have any power to get around that?
Look, we have the power of the American people. And when people raise their voices to demand answers of their representatives, to say, what do you know? When did you know it? And what is, in fact, a coherent policy, particularly when it comes to our national security? That is the baseline obligation that I think any administration has to the American public. For whatever reason, this administration broke years of tradition, particularly with our release of those tax returns, to not actually come forth and have a clear accounting with the American public. The basic question of that is, why not? And until you can answer that, you're going to continue to shroud your own administration with secrecy. The obligation on this is clearly on the President of the United States. Again, I hope that there is nothing there. I don't want a president or an administration that is anyway compromised by any foreign actor. And I want to make sure that the decisions that this president and administration make have the full faith and confidence of the American public.
Before I ask you about health care, let me ask you about Russian interference. And we know we're told anyway that it played a part in the recent French election as well. Yep. Where do you think that stands? What role does that have in the American political system going forward? Is it the new normal?
I think that we have to understand, and there has to be a full accounting for exactly what transpired over the course of the prior election. We have to engage with our counterparts in France and in Germany and in other parts of the world that are seeing the same type of activity, including obviously a massive email hack that took place about 24 hours before that election in France, to understand exactly what happened and what we can do to ensure that that doesn't happen again for the foundation of our democracy. One of the reasons why I, and I think many others, are at this point calling for an independent investigation of what happened with Russia and their meddling in the elections is to ensure, again, from a national security standpoint, that whatever opportunities were exploited by Russian intelligence are closed to make sure we can have as much confidence as possible in that integrity of the system going forward. That needs to happen. That's not a Democrat or Republican thing. Senator Marco Rubio, a prominent Republican senator, has raised his voice during the election season last fall, saying that those that were using some of the emails that were released during the course of the campaign were using emails released by a foreign actor to influence an election, and were now becoming a tool of a foreign intelligence service. And he spoke out against it. I applaud him for doing so.
I want to move on to health care. Are you taking your late great-uncle's mantle in terms of where health care goes in this country going forward after the House vote last week? Of course, it's by no means a done deal, the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. There's a deal that has to be worked out with the Senate before that vote even happens, because Democratic leaders are meeting with the Senate today saying, let's work on this, let's try to pull something together before that vote. Are you channeling Edward Kennedy?
Look, my uncle, I think, was a pretty good legislator and worked on health care for the 50 years, or nearly 50 years, that he was in the U.S. Senate. No one can claim that mantelpiece after 3 or 4 years in office. And I think even if you've been there for the time that he was, you earn that title by being willing to roll up your sleeves, to dive into the nuance, and to find a way to work with your colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, to actually find a way to ensure that every single American has access to quality, affordable, accessible health care in this country. And we still fall short. The Affordable Care Act made extraordinary progress on that goal, but it still falls short. It falls short in certain communities across the country, and even here in Massachusetts, as robust a health care system as we have, we still have our challenges. The commitment, I think, for all of us, Democrats and Republicans, has to be, how do you extend our healthcare system to make sure that every single person out there has access to it? The bill that passed the House of Representatives destroys the promise of healthcare in our country. It just, you all know the stats at this point, 24 million fewer people getting access to care, nearly $1 trillion cut out of Medicaid, which is not just healthcare for low-income families, but it's the largest payer of behavioral health services in the country. It's the largest payer of long-term care in the country.
But where's this going to go when it goes to the Senate? I think it took a lot of people by surprise, obviously, when it did come back into the House, when a lot of people thought the administration and the Republican leadership were moving on from this. They didn't. They circled back. Is there another surprise in terms of outcome in the Senate lying in wait?
Oh, yes. Look, I have extraordinary concerns that Senator Mitch McConnell will find a way to get this bill out of the Senate. I don't think it will resemble the House bill, but I think those that underestimate Mitch McConnell, you do so at your own peril. So I hope that our Republican colleagues are going to be willing to take up our Democratic colleagues' offer, every single one of them, that said, if your goal is to actually extend health care to make sure that every person has access in this country to quality, affordable, accessible health care, then we are all in to work with you. If your goal is just to repeal Obamacare to put up some political points, then no thanks. We're going to defend the progress that we've made to the very, very end. I hope that Senator McConnell and our Republican colleagues will take us up on the offer to actually extend the promise of affordable health care to everybody.
Let me just quickly ask you about President Obama. You were there with him on Sunday night when he was at the JFK Library Museum getting the Profile and Courage Award. There are a lot of people who want to hear him say even more than he did the other night. They want him to speak up, especially as it relates to affordable health care. Is the party looking to him to be that standard bearer once again?
Look, I think President Obama still remains enormously popular with the American public and certainly within the Democratic Party. And I think you saw again why during the speech that he gave on Sunday. It was poignant. It was powerful. It was a sober assessment of, I think, the commitment that all of us and the responsibility that all of us have to work towards a better future in your community or for our country. And you can do both. I think that's a mantelpiece that President Obama is going to wear for as long as he's on this planet, and we're blessed with that. There's also got to be an opportunity and a responsibility for other leaders, elected and non-elected, to step up and to try to carry on those values and that fight forward.
Including you, Congressman Joe Kennedy.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Great to speak with you.